Welcome to Mindset Tools Mastery. I'm David Phelan. In this presentation, Finding Mindset Gold Part 1, we're going to focus on changing beliefs to get better results. And in the presentation, I want to help you to clarify misconceptions about how the mind actually works, help you to determine how to identify the mindset necessary to get the results that are important to you, and also what to do in situations where you're having trouble believing in the results that you want and believing that they're possible. So to get ready, it's going to be helpful if you think about a challenge that you might be having or a goal that you're pursuing, and particularly if it's a goal that you're not getting the results that you are looking for. And this can be in your work, in your business, it can be in family dynamics, relationships, finances, health, it can be in your emotional well-being, your sense of spiritual connection, your ability to contribute the way that you want to contribute. So any area of your life that you are experiencing a challenge or not getting the result that you are looking for. And also it would be helpful if you are prepared to write a few things down as we go through the presentation. If you have any questions that come up during the presentation, feel free to drop them in the comments section and I'll answer them either as we go along or at the end of the presentation. In previous presentations, we talked about the idea that in order to be able to get the results that we want, it's important for us to have a vision of our results that is clear and compelling. And when the results that we are pursuing are clear and compelling, it becomes magnetic. It draws us towards that result. Our thinking, our emotional states, our actions are drawn in the direction of that result. And so in this presentation, I'm going to assume that your result is already clear and compelling. And then the next step then is to align your thinking with the results that you're looking for. And so over the next 4 presentations, this one and the following 3, we're going to be talking about the idea of mindset gold. Now, why do I call it mindset gold? When I think about gold and think about the value that we as a culture assign to it, most people would agree that gold is something that is worth having. But what's interesting to me that if you think about where gold comes from, it's mined from the earth. The gold is already there, right? It's not created, it's not a result of something that you did in particular. Its existence is already there. Now, we might have to do something to uncover the gold, to find it, to mine it, but the gold already exists. And so when I think about that in terms of our mindset, the same idea comes to me that our mindset is something that's already within us. It's not something that has to come from the outside. It's not something that has to be fabricated. It already exists within us. And so the work that we're doing is finding what is already within us and finding something that is really valuable that's already within us. So that's why I'm referring to these presentations as mindset gold, and particularly the idea of being able to find that gold that we're looking for. Before I opened my private practice, I was working in community mental health, and that was work that involved trying to connect needs in the community with resources in the community. So we would offer workshops and presentations, and we would facilitate conversations. And what we were doing is engaging different stakeholders within the community. It could have been residents, it could have been the city, services within the city, the administration of the city services like police and fire. We work with the hospitals, we work with schools, and what we were trying to do is to address common concerns within the community. So it might have been something like teen alcohol abuse or quality of life for the elderly. And the idea was to identify what the concerns were and to facilitate conversations and then try to identify and connect the different stakeholders with resources. When I was doing this work, I had been recruited by a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, and he was doing this kind of work and wanted me to join him. And I had met him through other work that I was doing in which I was managing a mental health training program. And the model there was to take these different stakeholders in the community, and these were organizations that were receiving state mental health dollars to provide prevention services. And everybody in Maricopa County, which is where I live and work, that received state mental health prevention dollars had to come through the training that we were providing. And the training was a cooperative experience. So if I was the manager of the Boys and Girls Club, I had a need for all of my staff to receive this training. And if I would go and offer one of these trainings, and then the manager from the YMCA offered one of the trainings, and then all of our staff could participate in these trainings, no one organization had to deliver all of the services. And so I was managing this program, and this is where I came to meet my friend. And he really liked that work that I was doing and recruited me to come and work with him. And so I got there, and we were engaged in trying to build a similar training program. And after about 6 months, we realized that the infrastructure that was necessary was not sufficiently in place for us to replicate that program. Now, when I left the training program that I was working for to join him, it added about another half an hour to my commute. So now I was working in a situation where I was commuting an hour both ways, and wasn't really now able to do the work that I was enjoying doing. And I really liked working with my friend, but about a year later, he decided that he was going to leave and go to a different organization. So I'm making this really long commute and doing work that I don't really love, and not able now to work with this person that I really respected and appreciated. So at that point, I'm thinking to myself, okay, well, do I want to stay here or do I want to do something else? And that's when I started to think about opening my own practice. And the challenge was that was a very scary thing for me to do at the beginning. And the thought was, I'm now working in a position where have a good salary for the kind of work that I was doing. I had great benefits, and there was consistency. I had time off that I was looking for, and I was respected in the work that I was doing. So there was a lot of benefits to that. And when I considered opening my own practice, then I was in a situation where I didn't know if I would have any clients. I didn't have any benefits. I wasn't sure if I would have any kind of income, and at the same time, I was taking on costs associated with opening a practice. And so the thought was, being in business for myself is scary. But over time, what happened, and this came in part because I was visualizing opening my practice, creating a clear and compelling idea about what I wanted. Over time, what happened is that belief about what was risky started to change. So the first mental health training program that I was managing, after I left, went under. Now, that not just because I left, there were a number of factors that were involved in that, but it no longer existed, right? And later, I realized that the position that I was currently working in could go away with almost no warning, which reminded me of a position that I had earlier in my career where I thought things were going great, and I was on an annual contract, and about a month before the end of my contract, I was told that the contract wasn't going to be renewed, and I had no idea that this was coming. And at that time, I was married to my wife Julie. We had two of our kids, and I was starting to panic about, what am I going to do? I had no idea that my position was that unstable. And so the change in thinking that started to occur was that really working for others was just as risky, if not more risky, than working for myself. So I want to offer that to you as an example of it is possible for our beliefs to change. And as soon as I got to that change in belief, like working for others is actually more risky, then it accelerated the process that I was involved in being able to open my own practice. And now, more than 18 years later, my practice has gone really well, and I'm here to be able to share this story with you. And so what I want you to think about as we're talking about this idea that our beliefs can change is that our results come from our thinking. Now, if you're familiar with the model that I've been sharing with you over the past several weeks, you know the model is that our thoughts elicit the feelings that we are experiencing. Our feelings are driving our actions, and our actions lead to the results. So it might seem like, well, what causes our results is the actions we take. But the way that I would invite you to think about it, it's like our actions are the mother of the results, right? But our thoughts are like the great-grandmother, right? And what I mean by that is if you take out the great-grandmother, the mother isn't going to be here, right? And so if we want to be able to get to the results that are important to us, it's really important that we look at what's going on with our thinking. Because if our thinking is not aligned with the results, we're not going to get there. And we talked about before that one of the ways that you know that your thinking is not in alignment with your results is that when you get into action, when you try to implement your plan that you think is going to get you the results that you're looking for, you can be in a situation where you're just kind of going round and round with things, and you can be in a lot of mental drama about, like, what should I do? Is this the right thing? One person is recommending this to me, and I hear this idea, and a lot of mental drama can go along with that. And so getting stuck in the how is one indication that your thoughts are not in alignment. So an example of this and the importance of our what's going on with our thinking was once working with a young man who was struggling. He came to see me because of anxiety, and that was like his identified concern. And over time, what we recognized was that a significant contributor to his anxiety was that he was struggling with drug and alcohol abuse. And he would have these episodes periodically where he would abuse hard drugs like heroin, and it would lead to all sorts of problems, family problems. He would get arrested and things like this, right? And as I was helping him to work through that, one of the things that became apparent was that his use of alcohol was the gateway to the use of his hard drugs. But he didn't want to acknowledge that alcohol was a problem. And one of the things that I tried to help him to see was that he spent a lot of his time thinking about alcohol and thinking about, how to not drink too much, and, can I go with my friends and drink and have a good time? And I just thought about how much of his thinking was related to alcohol. And sure enough, time after time, he would find himself in a situation where he drank too much. He didn't drink too much every time, but he would get to the point where he drank too much, and then once he had crossed that limit of drinking too much, then the hard drugs would follow. And so the phrase that one of my friends shared with me some time ago that is relevant to this, I think, is if you hang out in a barber shop long enough, you're eventually going to get your hair cut, right? He was hanging out in a barber shop in terms of his thoughts. His thoughts were so much centered on alcohol that eventually those were the results they ended up getting. And so I would encourage you to test this principle for yourself, and you can do this with on you, or you can do it with people that you know. And I want you to listen for what the person is constantly talking about. And then notice if what they're talking about is what's showing up in their life. Right now I have a number of young adults that I'm working with. And it's interesting to me the amount that they are engaged in social media and interacting with their friends online. And one of the things we try to identify is how much of that is drama related. And you can see in some of the conversations and some of the stories that they're sharing with me, it's just one drama story after another drama story after another drama story. What are their peers experiencing, right? And then I notice that in their own life, drama is showing up. There's constantly conflict, right? And so again, that's another example of what our thinking is centered on, what is constantly in our thoughts is what's going to show up in our life. So the way that you might want to think about it for yourself and the results that you're trying to get, the challenges that you're trying to overcome, is that you're already accomplishing the results of your current thinking, right? Your beliefs, your current beliefs are getting you the results that are already showing up in your life, okay? You can look at your level of income. How much money are you making? The amount of money that you're making right now is the result of your thinking about money and your thinking about work. What's happening in your relationships? If you have a great relationship, if you have a challenging relationship, what's happening in your relationship is a result of where your thinking is at, right? If you think about your emotional health, whether you are experiencing states of happiness and motivation and confidence, determination, or you're experiencing distress, depression, anxiety, again, that's related to your thoughts and your beliefs. So wherever you are in your life right now is because of your thoughts. Your current thoughts are getting you your current results. And so if you want new results, if you want something different in your life, if you want something different in your business, new thoughts are required, new beliefs are required. Before we talk about changing beliefs, I'd like to address where our current beliefs come from. How do we get them? So I want you to think about beliefs as a language-based type of thinking. And what I mean by that is they're sentences in your head, okay? And where do those sentences come from, right? So today, you'll have somewhere between 40 and 60,000 of these sentences going through your head, right? Now, many of these thoughts we're not consciously aware of, but that's the level of activity that's going through our head. And you're having those thoughts today for a particular reasons. Like, why are you having that set of thoughts and not a different set of thoughts? Where do those thoughts come from? Where do we get the thoughts that we have? Where do we get the beliefs that we have? So what happens as we're growing up is that we hear these sentences expressed. And initially, it's from our parents and siblings. We might hear things from our parents like, always try your best, or I really had a hard day, or you know, um, the did you see what happened in the news, right? I mean, they can be any sentences that we get exposed to, right? As we get a little older, then it's our teachers and friends and the sentences that they're using. We get exposed to those. And then later on, books, movies, social media. And so the circle of influences on the sentences going through our head expand. Now, when the sentences get introduced, one of two things happens. Either the sentence gets reinforced or the sentence gets undermined. So let's say that you're presented with the sentence, honesty is the best policy, right? Maybe you hear that from your parents, okay? So that sentence gets introduced, we hear it, and then it either gets reinforced or gets undermined. So if we observe our parents and they went to the store and they made their purchases and they walk out of the store and they realized that they didn't get charged for one of the items that they walked out of the store with, right? And then they turn around and they go back into the store and say, hey, look, you didn't charge me for this, right? They have that level of honesty. Then it reinforces that sentence that honesty is the best policy. If, however, we see our parents do something that is dishonest, that sentence gets undermined, right? We might hear like honesty is the best policy, but we'll see them engage in a little white lie. And then that it kind of undermines that belief. Well, is honesty really the best policy? Honesty didn't seem to apply to this situation, right? And so we have that reinforcement, or again, it gets undermined. And then we go out beyond our family. And so we experience our friends. Now, our friends might end up acting very differently than our parents do. So our parents have given us these sentences like honesty is the best policy, and maybe we've seen that reinforced from our parents, but then we start hanging out with friends and they're okay fudging a little on the truth, right? And so again, it kind of undermines that, and then we are in a position of experiencing this, and if the sentence in our mind has enough support, then it remains intact. But if it's chipped away at enough by these other experiences, then that belief that we have falls. It gets completely undermined. I remember an experience that I had in one of these situations was I was living in the dorm at the University of Arizona, and there were private rooms, but a common bathroom, right? And I remembered I was walking out of the bathroom one time, and I was washing my hands before I left, and one of the guys on my floor walked up to the sink, and he looked at his hair, and he rubbed his hands through his hair. He looked at me washing my hands and said, "Yeah, I don't ever wash my hands." Right? And that was kind of an eye-opener for me, because I think, like once I had learned to wash my hands, I never used the restroom without washing my hands. And so like this was like a revelation to me that people might do that, right? And so my parents telling me always wash your hands, and then I have this experience that had the potential to undermine that belief. So we have the sentences are introduced, and then they're either supported or they're undermined. Now, one other thing to notice with this is that sometimes the sentences that show up in our head, there's actually the sound of the voice that goes along with that. So it's a situation where, like imagine that a child has heard their parents say over and over and over again, "You're a worthless piece of trash." Okay. Fast forward to the point that person is now an adult. when that thought goes through their head, you're a worthless piece of trash, they might actually hear it in the voice of that abusive parent. Okay, so our thoughts that we have, the beliefs that we have get set up. And what I want you to recognize is that there are millions of sentences that we are exposed to, and millions of opportunities for those sentences to be supported or to be undermined, right? And so the beliefs that we end up with as adults are just kind of this mishmash of experiences. And they're definitely not part of a well-crafted master plan for what is in our best interest. So oftentimes as adults, we are in a situation where it would be to our best interest to modify our beliefs because our current beliefs are getting us results, and if we're not satisfied with the results that we are getting, we may want to change those beliefs. So let's talk about how beliefs work so that we can talk about how beliefs change. So oftentimes the analogy that gets used to describe the way that beliefs work is that beliefs are like tables. So the top of the table is the belief itself, and the legs of the table are the references that support that belief. So think about a belief that changes from childhood to adulthood. So if the belief might be that Santa is real, right? So why does a child believe that? Because they have the supports for it. It's been reinforced. And the supports might be things like mom and dad tell them that Santa is real, there's presents under the tree, they might go to the mall and see Santa Claus there, they see Santa Claus on TV, right? And if there's enough legs, then the child will believe that Santa is real. Well, how does that belief change? By the time that most people get to adulthood, they don't really believe in Santa anymore, right? So let's say that child wakes up Christmas Eve and sees mom and dad putting the presents under the tree. Well, that knocks out mom and dad told me so. It also knocks out that, the presents under the tree are evidence that Santa is real. And it also might challenge that honesty is the best policy idea, right? Okay, so if we knock out enough of those legs, maybe they go to the mall and they see Santa Claus taking off his beard. You knock out enough of those legs and the tabletop falls, right? So that's an example of how the belief changes from childhood to adulthood. But how about in adulthood? Okay, so many of you may be familiar with the story of Chuck Yeager. Chuck Yeager was the first pilot who flew faster than the speed of sound. Now, what was the prevailing wisdom prior to Chuck Yeager doing that? Did people think that a human being could travel faster than the speed of sound? And the answer is no, right? And not just like the general public, right? But even Chuck Yeager himself didn't think it could be done. He was interviewed after the flight and he said, I didn't think we'd be able to go that fast. I thought when we got to that speed, the plane was going to break up, but I couldn't let myself think about that, right? That's a pretty amazing statement. So he himself didn't think it could be done. The prevailing wisdom was it couldn't be done. Now, Chuck Yeager made that flight, right? And then what happened to the prevailing wisdom? What happened to the beliefs, the commonly held belief? Well, it changed, and it changed very quickly, and it only took one reference for that belief to change because that reference was substantial enough. So the beliefs can change, and as we're recognizing that beliefs can change, what sets that up is that beliefs are either supported or not supported. That's the category they're in. Now, the misconception that a lot of people have is that beliefs are in the category of true or false, okay, right or wrong. So an example of this would be if you think about temperature, right, like it being 100 degrees, right, that's a fact. And we can measure the temperature with a thermometer, and we can confirm, yes, it is 100 degrees, or no, it's not 100 degrees. So facts are in the category of true or false, right or wrong. But beliefs, on the other hand, are not in that same category. And an example of that would be, and I've used this example before, a political speech. You can, like say, a Donald Trump speech. You can have one person think that that was a great speech and another person think that that was a terrible speech, right? Our belief about it is not true or false or right or wrong. It's just supported or not supported. So the person that thinks it was a great speech has references, has legs for that table, why they think it was a great speech. The person who thinks it was a terrible speech has legs for why they think it was terrible. Okay, so we know that beliefs can change. And so then the question is, if your beliefs can change, what beliefs would be helpful for you to let go of, and what beliefs would it be helpful for you to adopt? So what I'd like you to do just for a couple minutes is to think about the new result that you want and to write down what comes to mind for you when you think about that particular result. And don't worry about whether you're identifying beliefs or not, just anything that comes to mind for you when you think about that result. And I'm going to give you about 2 minutes to do that. And then we'll talk about identifying the beliefs from that. So go ahead and write that now, and we'll continue again in about 2 minutes. Okay, take about 1 more minute. Any thoughts that come to mind related to the result that you want? Okay, about 10 more seconds. Okay, now, what did you notice about what you were writing? Again, think about the idea that the results that you're getting are related to your current thoughts. And as you wrote those ideas down, are you noticing any patterns? Are you noticing any thoughts that would prevent you from getting the new result that you want? What are you noticing about that? And as you're noticing what your current thoughts are, do you notice any thoughts that, if they shifted, would be helpful to you? Are there any thoughts that you notice are obstacles or barriers to the particular thought that you want, or the particular result that you want? Okay, so as you do this exercise, you might start to see the, the things that are coming up that are getting in the way. So now I want to talk about shifting from the thoughts that are limiting, our limiting beliefs or disempowering thoughts or beliefs, and changing those to the kinds of thoughts and beliefs that will help us to get the results that you want. And I'm going to suggest that you ask yourself some of the following questions to help you to figure out what to shift your thinking to. So the first is, what thought is necessary to carry you to the finish line? Now, what do I mean by that? Let's say that you are trying something new. Maybe it's a new product or service in your business. And you think to yourself, it's okay for me to try this. This is a new thing. There's no harm in trying it. Okay? Now, compare that to, I can definitely do this. Compare that to, it's easy for me to do this. Right? Now, it might be true that saying to yourself, it's okay for me to try, is not going to stand in your way. But the question is, does it help you cross the finish line? Does it help you to get to the end? So what thought or belief is necessary to help you cross the finish line? Okay? Second type of belief that is helpful is, what belief is necessary to get over the hurdles? Anytime we identify a new result, our mind is going to surface objections like, you can't do that, it's never been done before, what are people going to think, you don't have enough time, whatever the objections are, what your mind is doing for you is identifying the hurdles. And once you are getting the result that you want, all of those hurdles will have been cleared, right? And so we want the objections to come up. We want to be able to capture those and to know that they're there, because then it helps us to identify the beliefs that are necessary to get over that particular hurdle. So if you go back to the example of me opening my business and the thought about being in business for myself is risky, right? So that's the hurdle, okay? So I cleared that hurdle when I got to the point where I was able to say, being in business for myself isn't any more risky than working for somebody else. And now that I've been doing this for as long as I have, I would say it's actually safer than working for somebody else. So what question helps you, or what belief helps you to cross the finish line? What belief helps you get over the hurdles, right? And the next question, what will you believe when you have the results? So let's say that you're, again, launching a new product or service for your business, and imagine that after you've gotten it off the ground, that product or service is doing really well, and it's been doing really well for 10 years, okay? Looking back and noticing that it went really well for 10 years, 10 years later, what are you going to believe about it, right? You're going to believe, yes, this product or service works. Yes, there's a demand for it. Yes, people want to buy it, right? So once you're already getting the result, you're going to have certain beliefs. What if you had those beliefs now? So the idea is that anytime anybody has ever done anything new, there wasn't the references for the fact that it could be done, right? So people who have been able to create something new were able to be in the space of, it's already been done, and what would I believe, right? Yes, there's a demand for this. Yes, people will buy it. Yes, they'll buy it at the price point that I've determined. Those are examples of belief that you'll be at once you've already accomplished the result. So if you can adopt that belief now, it goes a long way in serving you to be able to get the result that you're looking for. And then the last question that you might want to ask yourself is, what belief gets you there the quickest? the easiest with the least amount of pain. So again, compare these different beliefs. Like, I can figure this out. Compare that to, I can figure this out with guidance from somebody who has done this before, compared to, I can figure this out from an expert who has done this repeatedly and who would love helping me, right? All three of those beliefs will get you there, but the third one takes away some of the pain and may actually expedite the process if you're able to maintain that belief. So again, what belief gets you there the quickest, the easiest, and with the least amount of pain? So these are questions that are going to help you to identify what beliefs can be adopted. And then it's helpful to know, okay, so once I've identified some of these beliefs, how do I actually shift to the new belief? So identifying what the new belief is the first step. And then after that, we want to find the legs that support that. Now, in an upcoming presentation, I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about how you find the references to support, how you find the gold, right? And we're going to spend an entire presentation just on that. And then the third step, so identify the new belief. Second is to support the new belief, to find the references. And then the third is to test it. Test the new belief. And what I mean by that is that your mind is capable of deceiving itself. Okay? A colleague of mine who is a clinical psychologist would talk about the idea of the I want it to be true barrier. That people have ideas about the way the world works, and even when they are presented with facts to the contrary, they can still maintain that belief. Remember, we said beliefs aren't true or false, they're just supported or unsupported, right? And he called it the I want it to be true barrier. So our mind is capable of deceiving us. Our mind can tell us, yes, I believe that 100%, when we don't actually believe it 100%. So that's the reason why testing it is so important. And the way that you test the new belief is that you look at your behavior, okay? What I mean by that is, if you believed it was possible, that belief would show up in your behavior, right? So have you ever been in a situation where you started to do something and you got a little bit into it, and then you kind of hesitated? It's like, I'm not sure if this is right. You know, in psychology, we call that approach avoidance, right? We're pursuing it, and then we're backing off, and then we're pursuing it, and we're backing off, right? That comes from our belief not being in alignment. So you can look at your behavior and you can see whether you're in alignment or not. And the way that you know that you're in alignment with a result that is clear and compelling is that you're either getting the results already or you're confidently on your way. So again, I've used this example before, but imagine returning from the grocery store, and you have driven halfway to your home. Well, you're not at your home yet, but you're 100% confident that you're going to get there, right? You believe 100% that getting to your destination is possible. So the same thing happens with our behavior about the result that we want, that our behavior demonstrates we're on our way, we're doing the things that are necessary to get us to the result that we want. And a helpful thought that can go along with that is, it's working. Just that simple idea, it's working, right? So as I'm sharing these presentations with you, and I'm trying to spread the word about mindset tools and about the work that I do, I'm trying different things. I'm trying Facebook live presentations now. I was doing Zoom presentations before, and there are posts on Facebook and Instagram, and now I'm on TikTok, right? All these different things that I'm trying, right? And the thought that keeps going through my mind is, it's working. Now, I may abandon a particular strategy, like I'm not doing Zoom presentations, I'm doing Facebook Live, But the thought was still, it's working, because the working part of it for me was figuring out what was not getting me closer, and then being able to adjust. And that trial and error process is necessary. And so if I can be saying to myself, it's working, like trial and error is working, it's getting me a step closer to what I want to be, that particular thought can be really helpful. So again, how we shift to the new belief is identifying what the new belief is, and then supporting the new belief, and then testing the new belief, right? And if you see in your behavior that you're not there yet, all that tells you is that you need more references. And again, stay tuned for that presentation where we'll talk about finding the references. And speaking of that, in the upcoming presentations, we're going to talk about stages of belief, and what happens when we try adopting a new belief. Oftentimes we start with a low level of certainty, and that's actually good. We want to recognize where our level of certainty is. Even if it's very low, that's okay. And in that presentation, we'll talk more about that, okay? And that's in part 2. In part 3, we're going to talk about, again, collecting those references. And then in part 4, we're going to talk more about the different power levels of beliefs, and which beliefs are easier to adopt and why. And then selecting from among the possible beliefs to find the ones that are going to work the best for you. Now, I know that's a lot of information in a really short amount of time, but I really wanted to make sure that I was able to get these ideas out. And these recordings are going to continue to be available here on Facebook. They're also going to be on our YouTube channel, so that you can go back to them if there are things that you missed. So in conclusion, please let me know if these ideas have been helpful for you. And if there are questions or concerns that you have, because the questions that I get from my clients and from participants in these kind of events, people that watch the videos, the feedback that they give to me helps me to refine these ideas so that they can be more helpful to my clients, be more helpful to you, and be more helpful to anybody who's coming across these messages. So I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of you might have. Again, it's been a pleasure sharing these tools with you. If you have found it helpful, can you think of 2 other people who might benefit from these tools? My goal is to be able to share these ideas with as many people as I can. So would you consider sharing this page with those folks so they can benefit from it as well? Also, if you haven't done so already, please like our Transcend Personal Development Facebook page. Please follow us on our YouTube channel, and follow us on TikTok. These are really important and help us to get the word out. And finally, if you're not currently working with me and you would like to, please send me a message here on Facebook, or visit davidphelan.net and click on the Client Inquiries link. Until next time, remember, God is blessing you.